Nighttime photography can be one of the most rewarding and also one of the most frustrating things that photographers can do. For every one photo that looks amazing, you've got dozens or more that are just complete garbage. Luckily, thus far, this is one area of photography that smartphones hasn't really capitalized on. Because in reality, a lot of people with smartphones can take great photos because the cameras keep evolving. I don't know how it is with the newest of the new smartphones that are out now, but I know with mine that's a couple of years old, nighttime photography, it's okay, but nowhere near as good as you can do with an actual real DSLR camera. Since this is a new dedication to the craft segment, I'm going to be giving some basic information along with some really funny stories about my nighttime photography adventures. Those who have no idea, DSLR or SLR for cameras, it's digital single lens reflex camera or single lens reflex camera. I always equate DSLR with real camera, quote unquote, not a smartphone. SLR cameras can cost you anywhere from a couple of $100s to several $1,000s depending on what you're looking for. Naturally, if you're a hobbyist or a hack like me, you get one that's lower on the cost scale and then use your intangibles as far as framing of photos and having the ability to find places that others don't go to kind of make up for the lack of expensive equipment. I mean, I wish I had the kind of equipment that my buddy Steve has, but I make do with what I have. My favorite time of year for nighttime photography is the winter, I guess selfishly because sunset is so early. To get real, true, good nighttime photography, you've got to go out typically about an hour after sunset to start getting good shots. So if it's June or July, you're looking at starting to go out to take night photos at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. So the irony is I think most of these stories I'm going to share are in wintertime. So let me start sharing the laughter and embarrassment, and I'll kind of give you photo tips based around my stories to kind of help you not do the same things I did. The number one thing you need when taking night photos is a tripod. If you don't have a tripod, you might as well not even go out, not even bother. Because everything that has to do with night photography is long exposure, leaving your shutter open for several seconds or much longer. So if you're holding a camera with the shutter open, all you have to do is have a breeze touch you, and it's going to make the picture blurry, and then it's ruined. Me being stubborn, or perhaps the FOMO of seeing other people's photos, I had times that I would go out night shooting without a tripod. This was before I had a really good camera. I had point-and-shoot digitals like the Fuji FinePix, or even GE made a camera. That was one I had. Those cameras and most SLR cameras have a maximum shutter time of 30 seconds it'll stay open. Unless you get one that has, I believe it's bulb mode, and the shutter will just stay open so you get a remote shutter. My buddy Steve got me one. Then you press and hold it and the thing will stay open for hours if you need. That's how you see people get the Milky Way photos and such. They leave the shutter open for several minutes. So before I had a tripod, I would go out, sometimes with people, sometimes by myself, to do some night shooting. And I would have to find things to balance the camera on, to sit it on, and then do the timer and the long exposure. So you hit the countdown timer, so it's 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then the shutter stays open for however long. And then you wait and hope that it's good. Man, I tell you, out of all those trips I did, night shooting without a tripod, I might have had 2 or 3 photos out of hundreds that were any good. So get yourself a tripod. They're not that expensive. I just looked. Good ones, they're anywhere from $15 to $50, depending on what you want to spend. A great advantage of night photography is being able to have light play tricks with the camera at times. One time I went with my buddy Steve to Nobska Lighthouse in Falmouth on Cape Cod. A beautiful, perfect night photography spot in the winter. Nobody's there. The first time we went, I didn't have a tripod, so all my photos were crap. But Steve had his, and there was one photo he took long exposure with the lighthouse, and while the shutter was open, 2 joggers came running by with their headlamps on. So there's a photo of Nobska Lighthouse with these 2 blue lightning bolts going through the shot. It's wild. Sometimes you get things like cars driving through your shot. I have a few photos of Chatham Lighthouse with the headlight trails going through it. And of course, you can do it intentionally. You see people do that, either running through the photo, holding a flashlight to create patterns. People do the flaming steel wool where they light it on fire and spin it around and it's crazy looking. Night photography leads a lot of chances to be creative. I have a great photo from Nobska with my buddy Steve. He was in front of me taking a picture of the lighthouse, and I had the shutter open for probably 60 seconds. And for the first 30 seconds, he's in front of me, and then for the other 30, he's left. So the photo, it looks like a ghost standing in between me and the lighthouse. So if I wanted to scam people, I could say it was a picture of a ghost at Nobska. After getting a tripod, the next most important thing for nighttime photography is to dress appropriately and have patience. Because a lot of night photography is standing around. So if it's after dark in December, January, and it's 20 degrees, and you're waiting 20, 30 seconds for your shutter to open and praying the photo is clear and not blurry because the breeze shook your camera, you need to be dressed appropriately. Also bring a flashlight, not just to see where you're going, but to shine on something to get the camera to focus. I can only speak from my experiences, but I've had to have a flashlight shining on something if it's complete darkness, so my camera will then focus on it and then I can hit the shutter button. Most times when you're out shooting at night, you're typically somewhere where there is something lit up that you can focus on, but bring a flashlight anyway. A big thing to remember when it comes to night photography is if you're out after dark, nocturnal animals will be around. Way back in episode 76 of the podcast, I did a dedication to the craft about coyote adventures and specifically told a story about taking photos at night and at sunset of Highland Lighthouse in Truro and 2 encounters with groups of coyotes. So I won't rehash that. You can go check that episode out. However, it's important to remember there could be creatures in the dark that you don't see. Of course, I have examples. My buddy Steve and I, who's always the photo travel tag team partner, so you'll hear his name a lot, we went to shoot this place called the Forefathers Monument in Plymouth. And shooting that after dark, it's amazing to get this 80-foot tall granite statue with the stars behind it. In fact, I think one of my photos I took from this trip ended up being in their guidebook in 2021, I think. There's a big open field in front and around this statue, but there's also steps directly in front of it with bushes on either side. So, of course, instead of going to the wide open field, I decided to walk up the steps, and I must have gotten too close to a family of sleeping birds in the bush, because they came flying out at me. So it goes from perfectly silent to these birds squawking and flying at me. I scream like I just got jumped by 5 people. And so Steve's yelling, "What happened? What happened?" And I said, "Birds flew at me." I think he just literally was like, "Oh my God, yeah, all right." Sometimes the nocturnal animals make your photos 1 in a million. One time we were shooting at the harbor in Duxbury, where one of the piers had this amazing Christmas tree on it, so it looked even better at night. I set up my camera on my tripod, focusing across the water on this tree. I clicked the shutter and stood there letting it absorb all the light, and during the photo, a great blue heron landed on the railing in front of my camera. So that first photo looks like a snow squall entering the picture. And it sat there long enough for me to get another photo of it, crystal clear. Oh, it was so good. It's one of the best photos I ever took. Of course, as soon as the shutter clicked to let me know the photo was done, the heron heard it, looked at me, and took off. Of course, when it comes to night shooting and animal encounters, sometimes you're on the periphery of what's going on. I love going and shooting the canal bridges, the Cape Cod Canal. There are 3 bridges that go across it, the Sagamore, the Bourne, and the Railroad Bridge. I typically go up there once or twice a year in the winter, shoot the same photos repeatedly, but I still love them. At the eastern end of the Cape Cod Canal, there's a power plant on the Cape side, and across from it on the mainland side is Scusset Beach, which is a really large area. You can camp there, but it's also crawling with critters. So I'm out there a couple years ago on the Cape side, shooting towards the Sagamore Bridge with the canal power plant on the left, when I hear across from me at Scusset Beach the sound that I can only describe as an animal being caught and then eaten. It was so bad, and but there's literally nothing I could do. I can't yell across at the coyote or whatever it was and say, "You leave that rabbit alone." So I had to just listen to this animal getting killed and eaten, echoing off of the water. Sometimes the animal encounters you bring on yourself. One of my nighttime photo stories, and stories in general where I look back and say, what the hell was I doing, was when I borrowed my buddy Steve's tripod and took my old, less reputable camera. This was probably 10 years ago. And I walked after dark all the way out to Stage Harbor Lighthouse in Chatham. It's at Hardings Beach, so it's like a mile walk. And yes, there are coyotes out there. But I decided it would be fun to take all this out to shoot Stage Harbor Light, but also bring some nips of vodka with me so I could drink and get a good buzz on before going to take photos at night in the dark surrounded by coyotes. Oh, but wait, it gets better. So I'm out there at Stage Harbor Light, taking a few photos. I don't know how they're coming out because my brain is all buzzed. I look behind me and I see this kind of tower set up with a ladder. So I'm thinking, oh, it's a weather station. I could climb up there with the tripod and get these cool elevated photos of the lighthouse with the dunes behind it. So I'm hauling my camera and the tripod, going up the ladder with a vodka buzz going through me. And I start hearing noises above my head. Luckily, it was nearly a full moon, so it was a little bit brighter. But I get almost to the top of this weather station, and only then do I see things starting to move. Because what I was climbing up to was an osprey nest, and they were sleeping. One of the osprey squawks. I took one step down the ladder and then jumped because it was sand, so at worst I was going to get sandy. I look up and in the moonlight, there's one black object circling around. That ended my shoot. Like I said, I have no idea what the point was of that photo trip. Stage Harbor Light is all well and good, and I've gone out there completely sober. But why did I have to have a few shots of alcohol to bring me out there? So for night photography, I would highly recommend a good DSLR camera, a tripod, dress warmly, be patient, play it safe rather than taking risks like me with the Osprey. But if you insist on going out there with your phone, always keep tabs on where it is. So we'll end this segment with this story that is mind-numbingly stupid. Maybe not as bad as the Osprey one, but up there. I went after dark once to shoot a video of the railroad bridge across the Cape Cod Canal being down with a train going across it. So it's a long video, of the bridge coming down and a train going across and the bridge going back up. It's not that bright, but it's still cool because you don't get to see that often. I think it's twice a day that bridge goes up and down. So I shot this probably 6-minute video with my iPhone. And when it was done, I got up out of the rocks down by the edge of the canal and climbed back up to the bike trail and walked back to the parking lot where my car was. Unlocked my car, got in, went to grab my phone to see how the video came out. And that's when I realized I didn't have my phone. No, I wasn't drunk and imagining I had my phone. I had actually shot the video. But when I got up to get out of the rocks, my phone fell out of my coat and into the rocks. I had to grab a flashlight and walk back in the dark, probably a quarter mile, hoping that I remembered where I went down into the rocks to sit and get the view for the video. And then if I found the right spot, I had to reach around inside the rocks and hope I could find my phone and not syringes and broken glass. The story has a happy ending. I did find my phone, but good Lord, I needed to get a chain on that thing like the cheesy wallets. But that wraps up Dedication to the Craft, nighttime photo adventures with hopefully a little bit of helpful information too. Because I wanted to give you some laughs, but I also wanted to give you something useful you could take with you. And it's that time of year. I've got some nighttime photo shoots planned, so maybe there'll be another follow-up segment with more foolishness coming up in the near future.